return statement. Let me show you that. So return statement, the purpose of when you use return statement, so return statement is going to have the topmost priority, highest priority. Every time when you use a return statement in a method, it is going to have the highest priority. Whenever the main thread is going to encounter the statement, the control will directly come out of this loop. You know this already, right? But when you are comparing this return statement with finally block, finally block is going to win. JVM will give the priority to what? Finally block. You have seen some examples yesterday. If you want, you can see my the yesterday's video for the better understanding. What I'm trying to say is, even with the return statement, the finally block will get executed, then the return statement will get executed. Right? We have seen some examples yesterday regarding this. Right? Today I'm going to give you another examples. In two situations, the finally block will get failed. The finally block execution will be failed in two cases. What are those cases? We will discuss that today. Right. Firstly, let me write a small scenario. Scenario is like I have a try block. Try block should always have the catch block to catch the exception, right? And finally block should go along with try and catch block. You cannot have a standalone finally block, because finally block has to always go with try and catch block. So finally block. I have said yesterday that what I have said, I have given a a great statement. The statement says the finally block will get executed no matter what. No matter what, the finally block is going to get executed always. This is the typical statement that I have given yesterday. But this statement, there is a contradiction in this statement, because in this scenario it is not going to work. Let us understand this scenario. Scenario is like, let me write something here. Finally block. Right, finally block. In the try block, simple statement that says try. The catch block, a simple printout statement that says. Now if I run this, we all know the output is going to be what? The JVM, the main thread will get access to the main method, and the instructions in the try block will get executed. Right? It is not throwing any exception. If the try block is not throwing any exception, the control will jump to finally block. Catch block will not get executed. Right? Catch block will get executed only if the exception occurred. The exception is not occurring in the try block, the catch block will be skipped. So the output is very self-explanatory. Right? Try finally block. When the exception is occurring in the try block, the finally block, the catch block will be executed, and the finally block will be executed. Even without the exception, the finally block will be executed. But today what I am trying to say is, let us say that the exception is occurring before the try block. System.out. If the exception is occurring before the try block, I am including a risky code which is system.out.println 10 by 0. This is a risky code, but this is not part of the try block. This is declared before the try block. Exception is occurring here. When the exception is occurred, it is not even in the try block, so the program will get terminated abnormally. In this case, the finally block will not get executed. Run this. Finally block is not getting executed. Exception is occurring, and since it is not declared in the try block, the program will be terminated abnormally. Finally block is not getting executed here. So what are the cases that finally block gets executed, and what are the cases that the finally block will be given priority? Only if the exception is occurring in the try block. Only if the exceptions are occurring in the try block, then finally block will come to the picture. Finally block will get executed. Even though whether the exception is handled or not, that is secondary. The exception should occur in try block. That is the point. Handling it or not handling the exception, that is secondary. Let us now, the exception is occurring in try block, right? It has the relevant handling code exception. So since it is an arithmetic exception, let me write here as arithmetic exception. Arithmetic exception E. Right? If I run this, this line is a risky code. Exception occurred. So as soon as the exception occurred, it will jump into the catch block. Right? Catch block is given with the right exception handling code, arithmetic exception, because the generated exception is arithmetic exception. So the catch block is going to handle this arithmetic exception. Right? This will be executed. That's why catch is getting it. This will be skipped because exception is occurring here. It will directly jump to the catch block. This statement will be skipped by the main thread. Catch block. Now finally block is executed. So, this statement, exception occurred and catch block is getting executed, and finally block is getting executed. Now the exception has been handled properly. Let us say that there is in this scenario the exception is not getting handled properly. I am specifying here as null pointer exception. The generated exception is arithmetic exception, but exception, the catch block is trying to handle null pointer exception. So the abnormal termination, right? Because the catch block is handling a different exception that is not related to arithmetic exception. Should be same. Here it is handling a different exception. So when the exception is occurring here, we look for the relevant catch block, but there is no relevant catch block. Hence abnormal termination. Even though the termination is abnormal, the JVM, the main thread or the JVM will ensure that this finally block is getting executed and perform the abnormal termination. See, finally block executed. After that, abnormal termination. We know this already, but if we are happen to declare this risky code outside the try block, then there is no power for the finally block. Finally block in this scenario, the finally block will not get executed because the exception is happen to occur outside the try block. Run this one. If anyone is asking you what are the situations where finally block will not get executed, this is the typical situation. Right? Finally block will only get executed. The exception has to occur in the try block. If the exception is occurring outside the try block, there is no scope for the finally block. It will become powerless. Right? Let me take this example. This is the first scenario, first case. Case 1, where finally block fails to get executed. This is the case 1, typical case. Case 1, while finally block, where finally block will never get executed. But where finally block fails to get executed. This is a typical case. The reason, the exception should occur in the try block and finally block will get executed in compulsion. If the exception is happen to occur outside the try block, the finally block will never get executed. This is one of the typical case. Very important in the interview room. Right? Where the finally block, what are the What are some situations where finally block will not get executed? This is one situation, one typical situation. And the exception is happening outside the try block. And what is the second case? Second case is like, let me give you a real-time example. For example, let us say that it's a real-time analogy. You can assume it like you have a try block, just an assumption, and you have many number of statements inside this try block, many number of statements. Let us say that the instructions is counting up to 100 instructions. Some 100 instructions are there inside this try block, right? And you have a catch block. So catch block is going to handle a general exception, a generalized exception, and you have a finally block. So what I have said already, finally block will get executed always, is getting failed in one scenario which we have just discussed, right? And again, this is another case where the finally block will fail to get executed. Let me keep this very simple, right? So let us say that the instructions are getting executed. One by one, the instructions are getting executed. This first instruction, second instruction, third instruction, fourth instruction, fifth instructions are getting executed one by one. At the time of executing this instruction, there is a power failure. What? You are encountering a power failure, power outage. While executing this instruction, there is a power outage, and you do not have any backup. Assume that you are using a desktop and you do not have any backup. Power outage, no backup, Wi-Fi interruption. So this is this situation says that you are encountering a power outage. As you are encountering a power outage. As soon as you encounter power outage, do you think the particular JVM is going to tell the power, right? Please wait for some time. Let me complete the execution. You can go out later. It's not going to happen. Once power is out, it is out, right? The control, the main thread, it is not going to get any help, right? The JVM has to shut down. The JVM is something that is executing, that is taking care of this main thread. Once the power is out, the JVM needs to get shut down forcefully, right? So let us understand, this is the JVM. Once the power is out, the JVM has to shut down forcefully, right? So when this is happening, JVM shutdowns forcefully. So when this is happening, right, there is no chance for the JVM is not going to tell, please execute finally block and then do the shutdown. That is not going to happen, right? This is a typical situation where the finally block will not get executed. What is that? Power cut. No, you should not say that. Power cut is not the situation. So this is just an analogy. Power cut is just an analogy. Then what is the situation? I will explain. Power cut is just an analogy, right? If I want to represent this in Java programming language, power cut is just an analogy. If I want to represent this in this sequence of execution and this particular interruption in the Java programming language, I can use System.exit. There is a class called system class, very sophisticated class. System.exit. System.exit, this class and this method combinedly used to terminate a Java program forcefully. It will terminate the Java program. It is just like facing the power cut, right? It is going to accept 3 arguments. One is 0, right? 0 is nothing but we can say that 0 is nothing but a normal termination. It is going to accept non-zero values. It can be anything, 1000 or 10,000, any integer apart from 0, right? So this is just an analogy. I am just replicating power cut in the real time. We want to replicate that in the Java programming language. This power cut situation can be replicated with System.exit. System.exit forcefully shut down the JVM. Even the power cut does the same thing, and even the System.exit does the same thing. This is a scenario where finally block will not get executed. Hope this is making sense. Right? Just type S in the chat box if you have understood this. Now type S in the chat box if you have understood this. Good. And again, this System.exit, if you pass, I'm sorry, I was saying one, if you pass 0, generally it is going to indicate that it is a successful termination. Even though the JVM will be shut down forcefully, but it is a successful termination. We define this as a successful termination. And again, you can pass two other values. You can pass 1 or -1. System.exit. You can pass 1 in the argument, and 1 or -1, both are going to indicate what? Unsuccessful termination. Unsuccessful termination. So this all three cases is representing a real-time situation. And if you are encountering a power cut, and if you are using a desktop, and if you do not have any backup, right, the program will be, the JVM will be shut down forcefully. Real-time analogy. If you want to replicate the real-time analogy, same thing. You can replicate. You can make the JVM is getting shut down forcefully, just like the power cut. My God, I have just deleted that. Just like the power cut, if you want to ensure that JVM is getting shut down forcefully, right, you will be typically using a simple class and a method which is nothing but System.exit. System.exit. It is going to accept three arguments. 0 is nothing but normal termination. If it is accepting 1 or -1, so both are going to indicate what? Abnormal termination. 1 or -1, abnormal termination. So these are the two specific cases where the finally block is going to get failed to get executed, where the finally block will be fail to get executed. Sometimes what happens during the runtime, you will be encountering a situation where the for loop is going to get executed so many times, right? If the count is getting increased to an indefinite value, you will be using the System.exit for the normal termination. Some situations are there in the runtime where you find the number of executions is increasing rapidly, it is going out of control, then in those cases you will use System.exit for the normal termination. Some situations are there, so where you will be using System.exit. These are the abnormal. Okay, if you want me to show the real time how it is going to work in the Java code, let me do that as well. Right. So let me place this risky code in the try block now. Try block. I said if I use System.exit 0. Right. In this case, finally block should not get executed. The System.exit will overpower the finally block. Right. Finally block has a good reputation of getting executed always. Right. But it is not living up to the repetition in two cases. One case is when you declare the risky code outside the try block. The second case is what? When you place a place the statement System.exit for the forceful termination, for to shut down the JVM forcefully. Right? In this case, this finally block will not get executed. Let me run this. Sorry, this needs to be placed outside. Because in this case, why in the previously why it is executed means the exception occurred here. The control is directly jumping, getting jumped here. So I need to place this before this exception, the try block. So I have this in the try block, and I am running this. Right, as soon as it encounters this, finally block is not getting executed. If I place this here, control will never come here because as soon as the JVM encounters the exception, it will directly jump to catch block. This scenario it is going to work, but when there is no exception, let me remove this. When there is no exception, definitely the control is going to encounter this statement, right? Try block, the control will be encountering this statement, right? When it's encountered this statement, it is like just the program is shutting down the JVM forcefully. Finally block will never get any priority. So in this case, finally block will not get executed. Only try block is getting executed. So there are two cases where finally block is failing to live up to the reputation. What is the reputation? Finally block is will be getting executed always, except two cases. One is when the exception is placed outside the try block. Second one is when it encounters when the JVM encounters system.exit. Hope this is making more sense. Let me copy this code and paste it in the. So these are two typical cases where the finally block will be failed to get executed. This is one of the not one of the most repeated interview question. Right? Right? Hope this is making some sense.